Imagine waking up one morning to find the heart of your family legacy, your dock, the place where generations gathered, reduced to splinters by the very people sworn to protect your neighborhood. I'm Cole Walker, and what started as a simple act of love and restoration quickly spiraled into a battle against a hooker and a president hell-bent on control, corruption, and crushing anyone who dared to challenge her. If you've ever dealt with HOA drama or felt powerless in your own neighborhood, hit that like button and drop a comment. I want to hear your story. Stick around, because what happened next changed everything. And you won't believe how a small-town showdown turned into a war over water itself. The dock my grandfather left behind looked like it was rotting on purpose, a forgotten relic by the water. So I decided to rebuild it, not just as a place to fish, but as a sanctuary. A masterpiece with sunset benches, underwater LED lights that made the lake shimmer like a constellation. I wanted neighbors to come together, to share stories and laughter. Little did I know, all I was doing was lighting a fuse. Just 2 weeks after I finished, the neighborhood began to change. People stopped showing up to the HOA's boring monthly picnic and started gathering at my dock instead. It was like my dock had become the new town square, and you could almost hear the gears turning in Patricia Northwood's mind. The HOA president who thought power was hers to grab and hold no matter the cost. Instead of welcoming the new community spirit, Patricia decided to take matters into her own hands. Without a word, she sent in crews with chainsaws. When I opened the cabin that Saturday morning, my dock was gone, turned into floating debris, pieces of treated lumber bobbing like broken promises on the water. I stood there in my pajamas, coffee forgotten, watching my grandfather's legacy drown in sawdust and splinters. Neighbors started to gather, drawn by the noise and chaos like moths to a flame. Mrs. Wilson, who's lived here longer than anyone else, was shaking her head in disbelief. Even the Hendersons and Kramers showed up, mugs in hand, watching this suburban nightmare unfold. Patricia stood proudly, clutching a piece of paper she called her emergency order, announcing to the crowd that my dock was a safety hazard and unauthorized construction. The irony was thick. This was the same woman who installed a hot tub on her deck without so much as a whisper of permission. Yet here she was, demolishing my professionally built dock like it was a crime scene. Bruce, the HOA treasurer, nodded along enthusiastically, but I could tell he knew about as much about the law as a golden retriever. The workers finished their job, and Patricia declared she had saved the community from a lawsuit waiting to happen. I wasn't going to let this stand. I called Tom Bradley, my childhood neighbor and now one of the county's top property lawyers. Tom arrived quickly, serious as a judge, snapping photos and taking notes. After reviewing Patricia's so-called emergency order, he looked up and said, "Cole, this isn't just wrong, it's criminal. She had no right to tear down your dock without notice, permit, or due process." His words felt like a lifeline, but they also made me realize how much Patricia had lost touch with reality. Tom warned me that some people get drunk on the smallest taste of power, forgetting they answer to the homeowners, not the other way around. I began to understand that this wasn't just a battle over wood and nails. It was about standing up to bullies who think they own the whole town. But the bigger picture came from Mrs. Wilson, whose memory was sharper than a tack. She told me about Patricia's recent rampage, fines over lawn lengths, mailbox colors, and even Christmas lights. It was clear this wasn't about rules, it was about control. And my dock, it had stolen Patricia's thunder. People preferred watching the sunset at my place rather than sitting through her stale HOA meetings. Patricia's identity was wrapped up in being the center of attention, and my dock had made her irrelevant. Just then, Patricia herself appeared, marching toward us with her usual fierce determination. She accused us of violating noise ordinances during a perfectly quiet conversation. Mrs. Wilson fired back with a perfectly timed jab. If that was too noisy, Patricia should consider moving to a monastery. For the first time, Patricia's confidence wavered. The dock was gone, but the fight for our community had only just begun. The moment Patricia's smug grin faded, was the moment I knew this fight was far from over. She thought tearing down my dock was the final blow, but instead it was the opening salvo in a battle over respect, power, and what a community truly means. I wasn't just standing up for wood and nails. I was standing up for my family's legacy and everyone who ever dreamed of a place to call their own by the water. So I called Tom Bradley, the only guy I knew who could slice through HOA nonsense with a legal scalpel. Tom arrived within the hour, briefcase in hand, ready to make sense of Patricia's so-called emergency order. He didn't even need to read much before shaking his head and saying, "Cole, this isn't just wrong, it's criminal." Tom explained it plain and simple. Demolishing private property without proper notice or permits wasn't just bad manners. It was illegal. Patricia's handwritten paper was a joke, lacking any real authority or process. Hearing that felt like the first breath of fresh air after being underwater for too long. Yet Tom warned me not to underestimate how drunk people can get on the tiniest taste of power. HOA presidents like Patricia forget they answer to homeowners, he said. She's running her own little kingdom, but kingdoms fall. I could feel the shift inside me. This was no longer a neighborly dispute. It was a fight against a tyrant who'd forgotten her place. The bigger story came from Mrs. Wilson, the matriarch of our neighborhood. She's lived here longer than anyone else and has a memory as sharp as barbed wire. Over cups of sweet tea, she told me about Patricia's recent rampage. Fines slapped on lawns for grass supposedly too tall, mailbox colors that didn't match the code, even Christmas lights that appeared too early. It wasn't about rules. It was about control. And my dock, well, it had stolen Patricia's thunder. She'd built her identity around being the queen of this little kingdom, but suddenly people preferred the warm glow of my underwater lights over her stale HOA meetings. That night, as word of the demolition spread, neighbors gathered, sharing their own stories of harassment and petty fines. There was anger, yes, but more than that there was a growing spark of something dangerous to a tyrant: solidarity. Patricia was losing her grip, and the dock had become the symbol of resistance. But then came the walk of shame. Patricia herself marched toward us, clipboard in hand, ready to enforce noise violations against a quiet group of neighbors talking calmly in my garden. Mrs. Wilson didn't hesitate. "If that's too noisy for you, maybe you should move to a monastery," she said, voice carrying the weight of decades of hard-earned respect. Patricia's confident mask cracked for the first time, and I knew the war was just getting started. Tom watched quietly, but didn't let Patricia's bluster slide. With a calm, lawyerly smile, he stepped forward. "Patricia, you might want to consult legal counsel before making threats you can't back up. Destroying that dock could land you in civil and criminal court." That line hit her like a bucket of cold water. The rest of the neighborhood was watching, and for the first time Patricia looked like she was losing control. But I wasn't waiting for court dates or HOA meetings to set things right. While she was still catching her breath, I disappeared to my workshop and came back with something that said more than words ever could. A hand-carved wooden sign planted firmly where my dock once stood, reading, "Walker Family Dock since 1987. It was a message to Patricia, to the HOA, and to the whole neighborhood. This land was ours. This legacy wasn't going anywhere. Leave a comment below to let us know where you are watching from, and if you like fascinating stories like this, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, because tomorrow we have another incredible story, and there are many surprises waiting for you in the next parts. That sign planted in the mud wasn't just wood and paint. It was a declaration, a spark that lit a fire under the whole neighborhood. Word spread like wildfire about what had happened to my dock, and suddenly everyone had a story about Patricia and her little power plays. Neighbors I barely knew started showing up at my door, sharing tales of fines for mailbox colors, for Christmas lights, even for the flowers they dared to plant. It wasn't about rules anymore. It was about fear, control, and a desperate grip on power. The dock had become the symbol of defiance, and that symbol was rallying the community. On a crisp Saturday afternoon, I decided if Patricia wanted a spectacle, she'd get one, but on my terms. I sent texts, made calls, and within hours, my ruined dock turned into the site of a spontaneous neighborhood gathering. Folding chairs popped up, coolers came out, and people brought snacks and stories. It felt like a block party born from frustration and hope, a space where laughter pushed back against the intimidation. More than 30 families showed up, filling the air with shared grievances and cautious optimism. This wasn't just about one dock. It was about standing up to bullying, together. As the stories poured out, the patterns became clear. Mike Thompson had his mailbox targeted, Lisa Martinez was fined over Christmas lights, and the Chen family faced legal threats for planting roses. The HOA's tactics were surgical: target those who spoke up and make examples of them. But something was changing. Fear was giving way to courage, suspicion to solidarity. Then Bob Henderson, usually the cautious type, admitted he worried about making Patricia angrier. "My wife and I just refinanced," he said nervously, "and can't afford more fines." His words silenced the crowd for a moment, the weight of real risk settling over us all. Just as doubt started creeping in, a video surfaced on the community forum, Patricia standing in front of the wreckage, claiming she'd removed a safety hazard. Her words were slick, rehearsed, and blatant lies designed to twist the narrative. It was propaganda in its purest form, and it was already gaining traction. I felt the sting of frustration, knowing how easily truth could be buried under manufactured fear. For a moment, I thought about giving in, paying fines quietly and rebuilding somewhere else. But then I looked around at the neighbors who had gathered, the kids running and laughing despite everything, and I knew backing down wasn't an option. That's when I grabbed my phone, flipped on the live stream, and faced both the camera and the crowd. "I'm Cole Walker," I said, voice steady but filled with fire. "This is what happens when you try to improve your community and a HOA president decides you're a threat." I panned the camera over the floating debris and the crowd standing tall. It wasn't just a dock anymore. It was the battleground for our rights, our dignity, and our future. And Patricia? She might have started this war, but we were the ones who would finish it. As the live stream rolled, Patricia and Bruce showed up like storm clouds on the horizon, clipboard in hand, ready to throw more weight around. Patricia announced the gathering was violating noise ordinances and ordered everyone to disperse or face fines. The irony was almost laughable. Here we were, peacefully standing on private property, and suddenly it was a crime worthy of a penalty. Bruce, with his usual nervous energy, started targeting neighbors one by one, pulling out manila folders and hinting at violations nobody knew existed. The message was clear: support Cole and we'll make your life miserable. It was a tactic designed to intimidate, and for a moment it looked like it might work. But Mrs. Wilson wasn't having any of it. She stood up, fixing Bruce with a stare so cold it could freeze fire. "I've lived here longer than you've been breathing, and I've never seen anyone as pathetic as someone who threatens families for having a picnic." Her words cut through the tension like a knife, and something shifted. Instead of packing up, neighbors started pulling out more chairs, unpacking snacks, and letting their kids run and laugh again. Even Bob Henderson, who'd been worried sick about fines, marched up to Bruce and declared he'd pay for a survey himself just to prove his shed was legal. Patricia's face flushed red with frustration. The intimidation wasn't working anymore. The next morning, I couldn't shake the feeling that Patricia was plotting something bigger. Mrs. Wilson had whispered to me about mysterious meetings and strange men showing up around her property. With Tom Bradley by my side, we decided to do a little reconnaissance. We followed Patricia from her house, discreet enough to avoid detection, but close enough to see where she was headed. 15 minutes later, she pulled into a Denny's parking lot, not exactly a power center, but the perfect place for under-the-table deals. Through the restaurant window, we watched Patricia meet a sharply dressed man with a leather briefcase. What they discussed made my blood run cold. Patricia was acting as a front for a development company, Lakeside Development LLC, planning to lease all waterfront rights from our HOA. Their scheme? Remove every private dock, replace them with a single professionally managed facility, and charge residents monthly fees for boat storage and lake access. And Patricia? She'd pocket a management fee of $2,000 a month for making it happen. The private docks were their biggest obstacle, and demolishing mine was a warning shot. It was a scam dressed up as community improvement. The audacity was staggering, and suddenly this fight felt much bigger than a dock. It was about defending the heart of our community from being sold to the highest bidder. Tom and I sat there, stunned, as the plan unfolded before us. Patricia was issuing violation notices, pushing people to surrender their dock rights voluntarily and lining her pockets, all while bullying neighbors into submission. Legal action was an option, but it would drag on for years. Patricia would use every delay to wear us down. I needed a game changer, something immediate, decisive, and completely legal. That's when the idea hit me. If Lakeside Development wanted to control the lake access, what if I controlled the lake itself? Tom looked at me like I'd lost my mind, but I was already pulling up records on my phone about Lake Millfield's water source and the dam controlling it. Control the dam, control the water flow, and suddenly the entire waterfront scheme would be powerless. The dam was built by a lumber company decades ago, and I found out it was going up for auction in 5 days. But worse, Lakeside Development had already thrown their hat in the ring. If they won, they'd control not just the docks, but the lake's water itself, able to manipulate levels and force out anyone resisting their corporate takeover. The clock was ticking, and I was about to bet everything on a high-stakes gamble to save my home, my dock, and my community's future. The war over a dock had become a war over the water that fed it. The days leading up to the auction were a storm of nerves and determination. I stared at the laptop screen, watching every detail of the Millfield Mill Company's asset list. The dam's water rights sat there like a golden ticket, waiting to be claimed. I knew I wasn't just bidding on property. I was bidding on control. Control over the future of my family's legacy, the lake, and every neighbor who called this place home. The thought of Patricia and Lakeside Development outbidding me kept me awake at night, but I also knew I had to try, no matter the cost. Saturday morning arrived with the courthouse buzzing with energy. Investors in expensive suits carried folders thick with paperwork, and the air smelled like old coffee and desperation. I felt out of place in my casual clothes, but reminded myself this was my fight just as much as theirs. The auctioneer's voice boomed, and one by one items were sold. Timber rights, equipment, land parcels. Then came the dam's water rights. The room grew quiet. The stakes crystal clear. The bidding opened at $120,000. 0 cents. A man in a sharp gray suit raised his paddle quickly, but I was ready. I raised mine just after, starting the back-and-forth battle. Bids climbed in tens of thousands, each raise a heartbeat in the race for control. The gray-suited bidder hesitated at $160,000, 0 cents, his confidence wavering. I pushed ahead with $180,000, 0 cents, feeling the room hold its breath. Then, with a slow shake of his head, the man lowered his paddle. Silence fell as the auctioneer's gavel struck the podium, sealing my win. I had just bought control over the lake's water flow, and with it, the power to stop Patricia's scheme dead in its tracks. The victory was sweet, but I knew the real test was about to begin. By noon, the legal papers were signed, and I was officially the owner of the dam's operating rights. The weight of that responsibility pressed on me, but so did a surge of hope. Patricia's demolition crew was scheduled to arrive Monday morning, expecting to finish their campaign of intimidation. But they had no idea the game had changed. I made arrangements with Earl, the dam's longtime operator, who assured me the water levels could be adjusted in hours, not days. This was about to be a real-life lesson in power, one that Patricia would never forget. Monday dawned bright and clear as bulldozers rumbled down the street. Patricia arrived with her media entourage, ready to make a show of her victory. Bulldozers and cranes rolled into position, drawing the neighborhood's attention like a spectacle. Families gathered on porches, phones ready, anticipation thick in the air. Patricia barked orders, her voice carrying over the hum of engines, declaring the removal of unauthorized structures to protect the community. If I wasn't there to watch, I was ready to act. Calmly, I approached the water's edge with a manila envelope, the official certificate of ownership for the dam tucked inside. Patricia's confident smile faltered as I handed her the document. "This proves I own the water rights," I said plainly, "which means I control the lake's water flow." The crowd went silent as the implications sank in. Patricia's protests turned to disbelief and panic. Then, with the phone pressed to my ear, I called Earl and ordered the water level reduced by half. Within minutes, the lake began to retreat, boats stranded on mud and rocks, especially those owned by Patricia and her allies. The ultimate reversal was underway. Watching the water level drop was more than just seeing the lake retreat. It was watching justice flow through every inch of our community. Patricia's once smug confidence dissolved like mist on a chilly morning. Her boats, symbols of her ill-gotten authority, sat stranded on muddy banks, helpless and exposed. Every desperate phone call she made to her lakeside development allies only hammered home the fact that her entire plan was unraveling in real time, broadcast live for everyone in the neighborhood to see. She pleaded, her voice cracking under the weight of panic, begging me to restore the water flow, promising to resign from the HOA, cancel fines, and call off her demolition crews. But I held the phone steady, telling Earl to keep the outflow low a little longer. This wasn't just about water levels. It was a demonstration of power, patience, and control. Sometimes, the best way to end a reign of terror is with quiet, deliberate authority, not chaos or violence. After that watershed moment, Patricia and Bruce quietly resigned from their positions, leaving behind a fractured but hopeful community. The fight wasn't just over a dock or the water rights anymore. It was about reclaiming respect and dignity. Our neighborhood, bruised by months of fear and intimidation, began the slow process of healing. New leadership emerged, people who actually cared about improving our community rather than playing petty power games. The lake, once a battleground, slowly returned to a place of peace and joy. And as for the dock, I rebuilt it, larger and sturdier than ever, a beacon of resilience and unity. This wasn't just my family's legacy restored, it was a symbol for the entire neighborhood, a gathering place where laughter drowned out the memories of threats and broken rules. Mrs. Wilson, our neighborhood's matriarch, hosted a barbecue that was less a party and more a celebration of survival. Stories of courage, frustration, and triumph filled the air, mingling with the scent of grilled food and the laughter of children playing by the water. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting golden light on the new dock, I felt my grandfather's spirit with me, proud not just of the structure we built, but of the community that stood strong against division and fear. The underwater lights I installed flickered gently beneath the surface, casting a magical glow that seemed to say, "Even in darkness, hope can shine through." This dock had become more than wood and nails. It was a testament to what people can accomplish when they come together. Looking back, I realized this fight was never just about property or control over water. It was about standing up when the odds felt stacked against you, about turning fear and despair into determination and action. I'm not naturally a fighter, but when someone threatens what you love, you find strength you didn't know you had. Sometimes, the way to stop a bully is not by matching their aggression, but by holding more power than they can imagine, and showing them you're willing to use it. That lesson, I hope, resonates with every homeowner out there who's faced their own battles, big or small. If you're watching this and dealing with your own HOA nightmare or any fight where power feels unfairly stacked, know this: you're not alone. True power doesn't come from yelling louder or waving documents with authority. It comes from understanding the rules, knowing your rights, and having the courage to rewrite the game when it's rigged against you. Stand tall, gather your neighbors, protect your legacy, because a community united by hope, resilience, and a willingness to fight for what's right is a community that will always thrive no matter the odds. The road ahead won't be easy, and sometimes it means risking everything: family heirlooms, financial security, even friendships. But the alternative is watching bullies steal your peace and legacy inch by inch, silence by silence. So when they come for your dock, your land, your community, don't back down. Fight smart, fight steady, and remember, sometimes the quietest voice in the room is the one that echoes the loudest. Leave a comment below to let us know where you are watching from, and if you like fascinating stories like this, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, because tomorrow we have another incredible story and there are many surprises waiting for you in the next parts.